Marina Alexis. She should be a writer.
Few characters on Pretty Little Liars are more controversial than Alison DiLaurentis. For years, fans have remained divided in their opinions on her. While some believe that she truly shed her formerly sociopathic ways to become a reformed friend and fifth liar, many others never quite bought into her supposed shift in personality. While I have always fallen into the second category, I believe that most fans, regardless of their outlook, would agree that Alison's supposed redemption fell short of convincing or well done. The fact that there remains such a divide in the perception of her character promotes this. Let's take a look at the issues with Alison's redemption. Before getting into this video, I want to add a disclaimer that I can only speak for myself and my own perspective. You are not wrong if you believe that Alison was properly redeemed and that her storyline was handled well. The points in this video are all completely my own opinions. Alison officially returned from the dead at the halfway point of Season 4, and although she didn't return to Rosewood and the show full-time until the start of the next season, this is the point in the show where the writer's redemption arc began to fail. If they planned to bring Alison back and turn her into the fifth protagonist and sympathetic main character, the season preceding her return needed to build up to this premise. Instead, while we get several half-hearted glimpses into Alison's softer side, like having her stare fondly at a photograph of her old friends, this season largely serves as a reminder of just how horrible of a person she was. The flashbacks showcased after learning that Alison was still alive show a nastier side to her than ever seen before, and one major plotline involves the liars reading diary entries in which she spoke nastily about them, their appearances, and their deepest secrets.
Despite her freakish pink hair dye, I've always admired Susie for her great sense of style.
How touching.
Even before Allie returned full-time to our screens, the stage was already set for her redemption to be an uphill battle, after constant reminders that she was a terrible friend and person. Next, I want to discuss what was perhaps the biggest reason why Alison's redemption was unconvincing for many fans: its inconsistency. There was no clear direction to Alison's character at any point after her return. To illustrate this, let's look at the path she took from the start of Season 5 and on. We spent a few episodes building Alison up as an innocent victim of the cruelty of A and others, only to dedicate the rest of Season 5A to tearing down that narrative and painting Alison as suspicious, untrustworthy, and ultimately both a killer and A. By the end of Season 5, the liars have deduced that she is in fact innocent, and she returns to being their friend and ally as they rush to prove her innocence and get her out of jail.
I've got two friends that are sitting in jail right now, and this person might be able to help them.
The majority of Season 6A paints her as a changed, reformed, simple church-going girl, and her friendship with the liars solidifies to the point that she's included in their final going-away-to-college scene. With this in mind, it would have been logical to continue integrating Alison into the liars' bond in the time jump. Instead, she starts the new season as a major antagonistic figure, begging her friends to testify for Charlotte's release, then throwing them under the bus for her murder. Even after Alison seems to recognize that she needs her friends in her life.
My friends are the closest thing I have to family now.
She remains a separate entity from them for most of the season. Finally, after yet another stunt in which the liars are convinced of Alison's guilt in a murder,
most of us think that Alison killed her sister.
She becomes the official fifth member of the group and is painted as just as close to Arya, Emily, Hannah, and Spencer as they are to each other. Though her role as the redeemed fifth liar is maintained through the end of the show, the inconsistency of Alison's characterization and role makes it much more difficult to completely buy into the idea that she's a good person. There was too much back and forth when it came to how she was perceived to lead to an unquestionable redemption. After all, when Alison has supposedly redeemed herself before, only to turn against the liars half a season later, why would this time be any different? It was clear that the writers had no real idea of how they wanted to handle Alison's character after her return, and struggled to stick with one direction for her. My next 2 points seem like a direct contradiction, which really goes to show how badly Alison's redemption was botched. First, I want to discuss the drastic changes to Alison's character in the last several seasons, to the point that at times she seemed to have undergone a personality transplant. Alison goes from a girl who survived living independently on the run for over 2 years, to moping in her house, actively resisting any sort of investigation,
We should leave.
and needing constant coddling from her friends. While some degree of personality change would be expected, considering the traumatic circumstances she'd gone through, the Alison of the later seasons resembles a shell of her former self more than a character who has gone through reflection and clarity to make a concerted effort to change. At the same time, Alison retains a nastiness and selfishness that provides a constant reminder of her old self. Between frequent snarky comments to her friends and others, a lack of concern for their well-being after the dollhouse, and her tendency to side with obviously untrustworthy characters, it's hard to fully believe that Alison has changed nearly as much as the show claims. She may not have been calling her friends skanks or giving them ultimatums, but her general, more subtle bitchiness gives the sense not that she had turned over a new leaf, but that she was simply making a sometimes successful attempt to hide her true colors.
Begrudge much, Jenna?
Next, I want to return to my previous mention of Alison's trauma. Like most of the main characters, Allie underwent extremely dark and traumatizing experiences, from being buried alive by her own mother to being trapped and restrained in a mental institution by her secretly evil husband. After a while, the despair and suffering that was forced upon Alison started to feel like the writer's way of pushing the viewers to develop sympathy for her. A good character redemption needs to come from genuine remorse and a consistent effort to make amends, neither of which was clearly established from Alison. In fact, over the course of the show, we only see instances in which Allie apologizes for the most mild of her actions.
I honestly thought that I was helping you guys. Telling you what to wear, how to act, who to like.
She expresses remorse for telling her friends what to do, but never for pushing Emily back into the closet, nearly driving Hannah to an eating disorder, or even blinding Jenna. At one point, she even goes so far as to insinuate that Addison, a student who by that point had done nothing but respond snarkily to Emily in class, was worse than she had been.
Is it just me, or is she?
She's worse. At least when I threatened adults, I looked up from my phone.
This combination of factors leads me to the conclusion that the writers felt that heaping trauma after trauma upon Alison would inspire viewers to feel sorry for her and therefore consider her redeemed, as opposed to actually showing her expressing shame and remorse for her former behavior. My last argument relates to the overall writing principle of show, don't tell. Over the course of the last several seasons, a barrage of comments are made by various characters referring to Alison's redemption. It's as if the writers are desperately trying to convince us that she is a good person, by forcing it down our throats as much as possible.
I mean, I have been used and abused by that girl more times than I could possibly count. But she has changed.
Besides, this isn't the same Allison we knew at 15.
But she's been through so much. She's not the same person she was. You know, people can change. She helped you find us.
My issue with this is simple. It shouldn't be necessary. If Alison's redemption arc had been believable and well-crafted, we wouldn't need characters to remind us every other episode that she's changed. It would be the natural conclusion of watching her interactions and characterization. That wasn't the case, for the reasons I've outlined in this video, so it became necessary for viewers to be blatantly told, time and time again, that Alison has been redeemed. So all of this begs the question, how could Alison's redemption have been handled properly? I'll take a few moments and briefly describe how I would have handled her return. What made Alison's character in the early seasons so iconic was her powerful personality and charming, manipulative abilities.
It's immortality, my darlings.
Having her retain those traits, using them for good instead of evil, would have been a great way to start the transition of her finding a balance between staying true to herself without bringing harm to others. After the dollhouse, I would have shown Alison providing support to her friends while also recognizing that they are in no state to track down A themselves, and taking a much more active role in the investigation. All of this would have provided a much more realistic foundation for integrating Alison into the group of liars in the time jump, while retaining the fire and spirit that made her fun to watch in the first place. Additionally, I have always felt that the writers needed to provide some actual reasoning behind why Alison was such a terrible person who did such awful things. The fact that she was possibly sexually abused or might have gone through some sort of trauma was vaguely alluded to several times, but an explanation for why she acted the way she did was never fully provided. When Alison's horrible actions ultimately come down to she was a bad person just because, it's much more difficult to understand her and move past her behavior. It is for all of the reasons I just discussed that it's impossible for me to view Alison as a truly redeemed character. It's unfortunate that so many missteps were made when it came to perhaps the most iconic and memorable character in the earlier seasons, from waffling between how to handle her role after her return, to stripping her of her most recognizable traits. Let me know in the comments what you thought of Alison's redemption arc, and I'll see you next time.